From inner resistance to receptivity. Today we're going to discuss the concept of inner resistance. What stands in our way, which is within ourselves, between where we are and where we want to be, our vision realized. It's the inner resistance. Many of us now, through the journey of these conversations, recognize that this inner resistance is within the subconscious. And we seem to bring it forth as a result of certain interpretations that we're giving to whatever shows up on the journey. In the last video, we got into it to a certain degree, and we talked about doubt, we talked about frustration, as well as we spoke of impatience, attributes of inner resistance. Now we're going to get deeper into these elements with some examples of how to revise it, or different perspectives that we can take on these elements. But before we go into that, let's talk about a big perspective shift that I had, a revelation. In 2004, I met an entrepreneur, a very successful entrepreneur, was introduced to me by somebody who worked in the company that I was working in at the time. And he ran a number of different businesses, started with humble beginnings and moved himself up to a very high degree of success at a very young age. He was only 2 years older than me at the time. He was 26 years old. And I met him at his sister's wedding. And I got invited to this wedding, and I had the opportunity to meet him. So we got into conversation, and he started to teach me about life lessons and the entrepreneurial journey and so forth. And he said to me, the very last thing he said to me is, one piece of advice that I could give to you that has been tremendously valuable for me on my journey. If in doubt, do nothing. After being on this journey for an extended period of time, I recognize more so of what he meant by that, especially working with the information from Neville. Because in one of Neville's discussions, he mentions, if in doubt, do the loving thing. What I understood later on was he was referring to when in doubt, as in identified with a doubt-based state of mind, to do nothing and to go back into the ideal state of mind, which has doubt excluded out of consciousness. It is from there that we know what to say and what to do. So thus, what he was saying is, don't identify with doubt. And when we are identified with doubt, we tend to say certain things, behave a certain way, which creates unnecessary complexity and convolution on the journey. Now, to understand this to a deeper degree, we go on a journey of revealing the inner resistance and releasing from the inner resistance. We then understand that creation is complete, eternity, and everything and all possibilities and all potentialities already exist in the eternal now. And based on our thinking and our interpretations within, we are allowing ourselves to go down certain journeys of expression or revelation, which the source of these interpretations are within, to reveal the different journeys that we have in life to the fulfillment of what we desire, the end result, or not bringing forth what we desire. And it's not to say that what we desire, what we imagine to be true, does not exist, is that we rather identify with that inner resistance and then surrender to a different potentiality. In other words, giving up. This idea of receptivity is understanding that the answers are found within. We find the answers within, the meaning within. As mentioned, it took me many years to be able to unravel this level of insight as to what he shared. That piece of advice served me, and it meant different things to me along the journey. When we identify with doubt, we may find ourselves saying certain things, which is not representative of the vision, which is not an element related to the self-image, the identity that is in alignment with the vision. We want to be able to catch ourselves when we're doing this, and mentioned in the last video, taking notes and observing the things that show up and revising it. Now, even though this is a Neville Goddard-based discussion, I want to bring up a quote from James Allen in his book, The Heavenly Life, because this further will stimulate our conversation today. He says, "Put away all external props and rely upon the truth within you. A creed will not bear a man up in the hour of temptation. He must possess the inward knowledge which slays temptation." So we can look at doubt as a form of temptation, leading us down a direction towards perhaps not bringing forth our vision, or creating unnecessary complexity and convolution on the journey to bringing forth our vision, thus not resulting in a flow-based journey, which is what we want. So when he says he must possess the inward knowledge, the truth is that it's more of receiving the inward knowledge that slays the temptation. The answers are found within, the revelations are found within, and usually it's found within our imagination. Now, to further emphasize this idea that the answers are found within, let's get into a quote from Neville where he says, "Creativeness is not an act of will, but a deeper receptiveness, a keener susceptibility. The acceptance of the answered prayer finds the means for its realization. Feel yourself into the state of the answered prayer until the state fills the mind and crowds out all other states out of your consciousness." He also says the mighty surrenders itself fully only to that which is most gentle. The wealth of heaven may not be seized by the strong will, but surrender itself, a free gift, to the God-spent moment. Along the lines of least resistance travels spiritual as well as physical forces. To the carnal mind, or the mind that is so identified with the five sensory experience, this might not make any sense, because perhaps to that mind, all that is experienced through the five sensory world is true. Now, to the spiritual mind, which we're looking to integrate with the carnal mind, all things exist, and all potentialities exist. And this is where we get into the fourth dimensional based inner conversations and dialogues that are in relation to the vision. So rather than being receptive, we get into taking, forcing, and trying to will things from a forceful way to bring forth into existence, rather than actually receiving the inward wisdom that would allow us to navigate through the experiences, such as the example that I gave with my mentor who shared it with me. In doubt, referring to identified with doubt, has brought us into a different state of mind. And the behaviors that will flow from it, a lot of times will end up being complex, unnecessarily complex. When in that moment, we can go back to our imagination, or say something, or revise what we are experiencing, and we'll give some examples as we go through the video, and then release from that identification from doubt, and then know what to do if something needs to be done. Now, to really get this, we want to understand this concept of creation being complete already, and it is seen by the spiritual self. The five sensory self looks at past, present, and future and forms the constructs of time and space, which is totally fine in this five sensory experience. But there's another aspect to ourselves, the one that works with imagination. When we go into our imagination or we imagine something, what we're doing is we're looking at what already exists. And should we choose to select what we see in our imagination, we will bring it forth through the inward knowledge, as James Allen puts it, inward wisdom that is found within, usually through hunches, inspiration, or inner voice. To prove this, if you look at any innovation or anything that has been brought forth, a creative expression, an idea that was seen into existence, it was once imagined as a possibility. And then it was committed, someone committed to bringing that forth. And they remained committed, and on the journey of remaining committed, they perhaps found inner resistance. But they were able to overcome that inner resistance, to ascend past that inner resistance and bring it forth. But where were they pulling this imaginal scene from? And Neville states, everything in this world is forever. What you now see, what former people saw, what they are going to see, everything is forever. These are parts of the eternal structure of eternity. This body, this little lectern, everything in this world is but a little part of the eternal structure of eternity. It didn't come into being at all. It always was. All the stars, everything on earth, all part of the eternal structure of eternity. Now I am told, let the individual imitate God as dear children. I am told, everything is. Eternity exists, and all things in eternity, independent of creation, now I'm going to create. God was the creator. It all exists independent of creation. And he states, so how would I do it? I can't think then of anything that doesn't exist. So anything that we can imagine, that potentiality, is a potentiality that already exists. Again, this might not make sense to the overly identified five-sensory aspect of us, but it makes sense to the sixth sense identified aspect of us. Now, the way to prove this in equation is to stay committed to our vision. And what may show up on the journey to bringing forth our vision, whatever that vision may be, which is essentially practicing the active assumption. He says we must act on the assumption that we already possess that which we desire. For all that we desire is already present within us. It only waits to be claimed. Eternity exists within us. If eternity exists within us, then going back to what James Allen said in The Heavenly Life, it makes a lot of sense. Put away all external props and rely upon the truth within you. Answers are found within. Truth is found within. But the only thing that may seem to create the added resistance on the outer world is first also imagined via inner resistance. And these are the elements of doubt, frustration, and impatience. Now, in referring to doubt, Neville brings up in one of his lectures, learn to be grateful for the desires you have been given. They already exist and are ready for embodiment in your world. So we've been talking about this on the last handful of videos. We embody it first via the concept of self. And then we begin to behave, act, and do the things under compulsion of that self-image in which we are embodying. And he also states, you are not called upon to do anything to aid their realization except to free your mind of any doubt as to how they will come about and completely accept them as you would a gift from a loved one. So the desires are the gift. And what we imagine or conjure up in our mind's eye as a result of the desire already exists. And then we embody the person that we see ourselves in our imagination, which happens automatically in the beginning. We identify with it. He calls this assume it as done. That begins the embodiment of the vision or the self-image in relation to the vision, the identity. So now we maintain loyal to that vision or that assumption. The next thing that could happen, may happen, is doubt shows up. So going back to what I had learned, when in doubt, do the loving thing. So the loving thing then would be to not identify with the doubt, because the doubt is also related to what James Allen says here, the hour of temptation. So doubt is the temptation, saying, for example, here, I took a note, do I bring enough to this relationship? So say a person wants a relationship, be it a business relationship, a romantic relationship, any kind of relationship. So they imagine themselves to be in that end result of having that relationship. And then perhaps they have a doubt for whatever the reason may be. Do I bring enough to this relationship? Remember we talked about this in the last handful of videos? Not recognizing that we are the person of value already. If eternity is within us, all wisdom, everything exists within us, then we have everything and we are complete within us. We might not recognize that for whatever the reason may be, but when we recognize that we bring everything to the relationship. So then we release ourselves from the doubt. Because if we identified with that doubt, let's say, and you did something based on identification of a state of mind infused with doubt, then you might start to behave differently in that relationship. Perhaps you might start becoming jealous or resentful or fearful that you might lose your partner, be it business partner or romantic partner and so forth. That is the result of the identification of the doubt. So we can then create an affirmation that says, I realize that I have all of eternity existing within me. As a result, I am complete. As a result, I find myself bringing the value out that already exists within me. I realize the value is, was, and always within me. As a result, I feel more at ease moving forward towards the relationship that I desire. As a result, I find myself maintaining the ideal state of mind in relation to the vision. The same is to be said about frustration. And Neville states, so if I desire something and I don't realize it, then I simply continue a life of frustration. If I realize my objective, I have been saved from frustration. So at some point in this journey, we begin to, you could say, take our imagination more seriously. We understand the power of imagination. We understand that imagination is revealing the infinite potentialities. We realize that certain experiences that we have or information that we're consuming is stimulating certain thoughts or scenes in our imagination. We recognize that if we identify with that scene, then we bring it to pass. When we recognize that this is how it is, then we consciously work with imagination and we bring forth our results, such as revising or changing the different aspects that are revealing things about ourselves on the journey and bringing it more into how we actually desire it to be. So when he says learn to be grateful for the desires, we receive the desires within. And we encourage the desires via what do we want to create, because they stimulate the imagination. And what is in our imagination is brought forth into existence, should we stay committed to it. And really what can prevent staying committed to the vision is inner resistance, doubts, frustration, and impatience. So here's an example of frustration. Am I doing the right things in business? So now this can be looked at as a doubt-based, but this could be a source of frustration. So a person might not see how what they're doing right now is related to the vision. One of the things that I've realized on this journey is that everything that I've ever done has contributed to where I am right now and is further contributing to where I'm going to go next. And such is the case with any entrepreneur that I've ever spoken with. They have learned various skills, they had various reference experiences, and these skills and reference experiences can be translated into stories in which you can help somebody overcome something that you've experienced in your past through your own experiences. They can be translated into products and services. How many products and services have been brought forth as a result of what would have been challenges that an entrepreneur had once gone through and solved it within themselves? And a lot of times they never even saw themselves as an entrepreneur. They just said, hey, if I have this problem and I'm able to overcome it, maybe other people want to overcome this problem. So they innovate, they create products or services that are a result of that. So then we release from this resistance-based interpretation, am I doing the right thing? The truth is that everywhere you are on the journey to bringing forth your success is further bringing forth your success and further revealing as to what you can further understand about what is within the subconscious. And if it is inner resistance-based, you can change it. So for example, an affirmation like this may be helpful. I realize that everywhere I am right now on this journey to bringing forth my business success is important and valuable to me. I'm learning what needs to be learned. I'm experiencing what needs to be experienced. And I realize that this experiences and understandings and wisdom will pave the foundation for future successes. So where I want to be right now poses an opportunity for me to find more flow, for me to find more joy, for me to find more understanding. I then realized that as a result of doing this, I maintain my ideal state of mind. As a result of maintaining my ideal state of mind, I connect to my inner voice. I draw forth the inward knowledge. I become more receptive to the ways that are revealed within me to bring forth my vision. So the next is impatience. And Neville states, were we functioning on higher levels, everything would be immediately subject to our imaginative power. On this level, we're talking about the carnal self, five sensory self, it takes a little while. And so it takes persistence, it takes patience, it takes diligence. Because in your imagination, which is connected to the sixth sense self, you can not only see what you want, you can imagine any potentiality that exists instantaneously. You could see yourself in another country, you could see yourself having a certain relationship, you can see yourself having a certain level of business success, and you can even see yourself then literally a minute later using what you had learned from that previous success to facilitate the next success, such as entrepreneurs that do this. They see one version of a product in their imagination, and then after that, they think about how they could turn that product into multiple other sub-products or related products to serve different markets as a result of going through a sequence of events in their imagination, happening instantaneously. But he says here on this level, the five sensory level, we remember that it's in the process of rearrangement to reflect the vision, and it's happening through you via the inward knowledge that you receive within you. And here's an example to clarify. Inner resistance, an attribute based on impatience. I don't feel like I'm an expert right now, or an expert yet. Many of you know that for years I would teach speed reading with iris reading. And there were some individuals that would show up, and they were doing a lot of things to acquire knowledge, to produce success. A lot of them were even at higher levels of success. But for whatever the reason may be, they never felt satisfied or happy of the kind of progress that they're making. And one of the things that we taught them through the journey was, in order to be able to consume large volumes of information, we have to relax the overly active, overthinking mind to be more receptive to absorb the information. So they had a very big shift in their consciousness when they realized this, because they always thought that that impatience that they were identifying with was actually helpful for them, but in actuality, what it was doing was it was creating unnecessary resistance. They also found themselves to be very stressed out, frustrated, and so forth. So there's many ways to bring forth an end result. But the beautiful thing about the process that Neville Goddard speaks of is one of high leverage. It's selecting in your imagination from what already exists, committing to it. And through the act of revision and inner dialogue, such as the affirmations that I gave, we reduce the resistance to remove that unnecessary complexity on the journey to bringing forth that, whatever it may be, the business success or relationship success. So I trust you found this information to be useful and beneficial for your journey. If you want to copy this mind map, the link is in the description. Thank you very much for watching. I'll talk to you soon. Take care.